Well, thank you, Nahina, and thank you everyone
Pleasure, thanks.
for being here. It's an honor to be with you all, and I do hope that as we speak now, that this finds you all well and your loved ones as well. And I hope that you and your loved ones and your countries and all stay secure and safe. Um, I'm Hassan. I am now the chair of the accounting department at Maaref University. Ali, my colleague, has made it a lot easier for me now. He kind of laid the ground for me to get into another topic that we worked on. Prior to joining Al Maaref University, that was 3 years ago, I lived in Australia for about 13 years or 14. I worked as a lecturer, accounting lecturer. The accounting department seems like dominating today. As an accounting lecturer at Charles Darwin University since 2009. In fact, I've brought a lot of experience with me from Australia. One that I never thought I'll use was the e-learning experience. Charles Darwin University, as you may all know, it's been involved in online learning for a very long time. So I did teach there, and luckily I managed also to use that here at Al Maaref University since I arrived. Today I will be speaking about assessment. And I think COVID and the crisis that we went through has, I think, I hope that I'm not wrong there, that has managed in somehow to get us out of the box that we kind of been living in academia for a very long time, and to rethink what we've been doing for a very long time, to see why we're actually doing the work that we do the way that we've been doing it for a long time. One of those issues is definitely assessment. I thought, why are we assessing students in the first place? Are we assessing them to give them a grade? Are we grading them? Or are we actually assessing them in order to ensure that we're achieving the learning objectives of the course and the learning objectives and the outcomes of the school that they belong in, and that major and their specialization that they specialize in? Are we assessing them in a way to align these and accumulate these learning objectives that they achieve from each course from each school, so they achieve and come out with a certain set of competencies and graduate attributes at the end? Are we succeeding in that? So I thought, although we start off by some certain goal in our mind when we actually start to teach a course, we say, well, this is the set of learning objectives that we wanted to achieve, and based on that we are supposed to design activities, design the lectures and choose the chapters that we'll actually cover in this course, the readings that students be required to do, and the set of formative assessments that we may take students through. And hopefully by the end of these activities, by the end of the lecture, by the end of these readings and activities that we assign to students will be able to achieve certain learning outcomes. And these learning outcomes, once accumulated throughout the semester, we then be able to conduct a summative assessment at the end of the semester. The objective of that summative assessment, as you may all know, is basically to tell me that the student is now able to analyze, if that is the learning objective, is to evaluate. Is now the student is able to criticize, or to prepare, or to apply, or to define. depending on what the learning objective is. But the big question here is, are we succeeding? To what extent summative assessments have actually, and this applies in the traditional learning plus the, I'm not sure whether we can call it the traditional, but I mean by the traditional is the pre-COVID most dominating pedagogies and teaching philosophies that were used. To what extent summative assessment have actually played the role that they're meant to, which is, again, is to make sure that the student has now achieved the learning objectives. From, you know, now recently, I've actually, and while we're doing this work, I've talked with a lot of accounting firms and a lot of accounting offices, and it was interesting that they, the two observations. One, that they questioned the output of universities prior COVID. So when traditional learning was there, they questioned, you know, the value and the true attributes and the true skills and competencies that students actually do have when they graduate from universities. I know that they cannot be carried across, but they did you know, raise concerns about this. However, they raised a serious concern when it came to online learning. They seem that they do not trust the way we're assessing students now, with all the talk around cheating and the lack of you know, legitimate tools that actually can prevent plagiarism and all of that. Also with the talk about the ill-prepared instructors and the lack of infrastructure and all of this. So I think I could also relate that discussion to an article that was written once in the Business Insider, talk about the you know, the top companies in the world, talking Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, and all this. They you know, they say that you know, universities are failing in preparing students for employability. I know we can debate this, you know, irrespective of whether I agree or disagree, but this is what came out. I think the issue here is about alignment. So summative assessment, how aligned are they to the learning objectives? The question again here, can we really, even in a traditional way, could we really assess students' achievement of the learning objectives in a 2 or 3 hour final exam? To what extent this assessment, this summative assessment, really aligned with the learning objective? So if a student is an A student, if someone scores an A on the final exam, did this tell me prior to COVID that the student has actually achieved all the learning objectives, since he's a high distinction student, or he's an A student, or she? So the issue is with alignment. After COVID, or throughout COVID, we're still there. We had to, I think, pay a closer attention. And here I'm talking about the Maaref University experience, but particularly here. We had to pay closer attention and spend time, which we were meant to do that earlier, and we probably were doing the audit and reviews of final exams, but we did it in you know, more this time, since, you know, we have to think again out of the box, kind of, and think about the way we were doing things for the last decades. It appeared that assessments, final assessments, summative assessment are not so aligned. So it could be that the learning objective is about you know, to criticize or to evaluate. However, the summative assessment, the final exam, tests students on their ability to define, and their ability to apply, and their ability to prepare. Okay, so the issue here was with the alignment here. And if we look at the most common layout of assessment structures, whether it's in Australia where I worked, and then some other universities as well, or in Lebanon, or in the Middle East generally, and in Europe, and mostly we're talking about 80% of the assessments are summative. I know some universities may have a different structure than this, but you know, we're talking about an 80% of the assessment is summative, and 20% for formative assessments. I do understand why universities, and we choose, and we may continue to rely heavily on summative assessments, since, you know, we're talking mainly here about final exams. We're talking about, you know, final exams. They've been seen as an authentic way we can hold students accountable, and it's a requirement by most accreditation bodies and you know, ministries of education around. I know if I'm correct there, the Institute of Certified Public Accountants in Australia, CPA, require prior to issue the accreditation for the accounting departments and in School of Business, that they need to have in the assessment structure not less than 60% of the assessment should go to final exams, and this 60% should be a proctored and invigilated final exam. Okay, I'm not sure how did they go about this now. This after COVID. So again, this is a requirement again. It's non-time consuming, and put a smiley face there because I assume the reaction on your faces once you see that. I know it's in comparison with the formative assessments, it's non-time consuming. So basically, this was debatable. This way of assessing students is debatable and was debatable and will continue to be debatable prior to COVID and in a traditional learning environment. Okay, so definitely, in my opinion here, this assessment structure does not work in online learning, and we need to change the assessment structure, change the rigid assessment items that we had prior then. And this is the work that we did at Maaref University after speaking with stakeholders, let me say, with the students, with instructors, definitely. We had the vision and mission of the faculty and the university, and the learning objectives and the course objectives in front of us. We spoke with employers, okay, and we spoke with the students and instructors, and we assessed the experience of the spring. And we had to move to a different assessment structure where we actually emphasize the use of online formative assessments. So we now have a larger weight goes towards formative assessments. And the purpose of formative assessments, of online formative assessments, is basically, it's not to grade students. I know they will have a grade at the end, but mainly it's to gauge a student's learning. Okay, so the purpose here is to try to determine the student's strengths and capitalize on those as early as possible. Diagnose the student's weaknesses through this repetitive formative assessment, and provide feedback, and so they move forward. These formative assessments now, they divided right through the semester. There's repetitive assessments with low stake, so low percentage goes towards this, okay? And this is an opportunity, again, I'm relating this to the Bloom's taxonomy and to the upper level of the Bloom's taxonomy. Formative assessments appear to actually work. This is another research that I'm planning to conduct at a later stage, but I do believe that formative assessments do trigger and do help us achieve the higher order thinking in the Bloom's taxonomy. So if I'm talking about a learning objective that require analysis, that require criticizing, that require evaluation, and that I think it's easier I hope that this is the correct way, easier to do it through a formative assessment rather than a summative assessment. And we can capitalize on students' strengths there, and all, if they have weaknesses, we can also work to improve that. So again, formative assessments, you know, this would require instructors to, well, firstly, to be trained on how to conduct and how to provide constructive feedback, okay, and also on how to align these assessments with the learning objectives. And I think since, because they're repetitive, they are quite large in quantity, this will help instructors and put them in a better position to align those activities and those formative assessments to the learning objectives. I know you're all thinking now, but how do we have time to do all of that? Definitely, you're right. It's so time consuming, okay? And that's why what we did at Maaref University, we didn't only consider the reduction of summative assessments and replacing that with a formative assessment. Okay, so it wasn't only this. Okay, so for example, if you look at the poll that goes down the bottom there, you will see that you know, in a question that was asked to about 82 instructors answered this, and they ranked how they spend their time last spring. You know, they said, well, we spent mostly recording lectures, running live sessions, responding to students' queries and questions, preparing assessments, providing feedback on students' work, grading, responding to administrative requests. Luckily, the last one came last, responding to administrative requests. But although, you know, instructors spend a fair bit amount of their time actually, you know, on assessments, okay, the outcome, like Ali said earlier, the outcome wasn't pleasing. You know, instructors do believe, and we do also through our inspection, let me say, that the learning objectives of courses weren't achieved as planned, as we hoped. Okay, so we did change a number of things. Okay, and we're hoping this again wasn't just an us decision in the e-learning committee, but also through the conversation that we had with instructors, with students, with the employers, with the IT department here at the university, with the student affairs office, with the family, the parents of those students as well. You know, we changed the class and the assessment structure. So for example, here we use the American credit system. So we, each course is split out into 2 days a week. You know, so each is an hour and a half, each session is an hour and a half. And, you know, we now kind of eliminated one of those sessions to basically, the reason behind that was to allow the instructor time. So by removing one of those sessions, still getting paid for it, and removing one of their sessions basically to allow the instructor time to be used and invested properly in preparing smart assessments. But what I mean by smart assessment here, that assessment that basically I can analyze it to gauge a student's learning. To allow instructors to provide constructive feedback, to follow up on students, to shout to students who actually seem to be having weaknesses right at the beginning of the semester. Okay. Also, because a lot of time was spent responding to students' queries and questions that was mainly due to unclarity, due to unclear expectations. Okay, we conducted also online course design training, and so instructors are now in a better position to instruct the students online and to also clarify expectations and that. Finally, what we did was we reduced the summative assessment down from 80% to 55%. So now there's more room, 45% of the assessments are and that weight of the assessment goes to formative assessment for reasons that I've discussed earlier. I'm not sure how I did regarding time, Nahina, but I will. I'll stop here.
Thank you, okay. Thank you, Hassan. The time is fine. You completed the time, but thank you so much. It's a very important topic and very nice presentation. So can we just take 1 minute to take any question if we have any?
I got a question, Nahina.
Sure.
Thank you, Hassan. Like, you know, the last two presentations were brilliant. Like, you know, and I understand your pain, Ali, and I understand where you come from, Hassan, when you said that you don't actually agree with regard to the traditional assessments. Yes, I have worked in many universities before, and yes, most of them are using the 80-20 rule with regard to assessment design. And I totally agree with you that this doesn't work, not even in online platform. It is also in traditional setting, because in our experience at SoTT University, we are trying to make sure that when we design assessments for learning. And it's not mainly just engaging students in a way that at the end of the day, we want to gauge their understanding. And we also have graduate attributes that we need to achieve. So teamwork, conflict management, digital literacy, all of these attributes are necessary for students who are going to graduate and meet the industry requirements. And I agree with you, like the research that we have done before, it says that employers are not happy with what we are doing as educators. And it's sad, because we are trying to do something, but like, you know, unless we have an integrated approach to everything, it doesn't work. So I have some questions for you. One, with regard to the formative assessments that you have devised, did you research about the nature of assessments that could combat cheating, that could engage students in a way that they feel that they will gain some attributes as graduates at the end of the day, not only the learning outcomes, apply, evaluate, or explain, all that stuff? And the second question for you is with regard to the assessment at the end of the term. Do you engage students by doing group-based assessments so you can foster some experiential learning and reflection at the end? And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Samir. You reminded me when you used the word engagement. I'll actually, if you allow me, I'll share. I did stop sharing my screen. I will re-share my screen now to share with you, or maybe I can drop it in the box. There is something that I used. This is away from your question, Samir, but I had planned to speak about it. It's there is a website called Wheel of Names. Okay, where you actually, I had in my intro to accounting class, you know, which we started 3 weeks ago, more than 30 students, and it's an excellent way to keep those more than 30 students engaged right through the hour and 15-minute session by actually having their names on that wheel that you spin, and then your the names come out, and then you ask them questions. So I wanted to say that. Regarding the assessments and the formative assessment and type of formative assessments that we're using, yes. So definitely we do have a peer-to-peer review and peer-to-peer work that they need to work along, and that hopefully will trigger their analysis skills, and also their teamwork, and if it's a project. The other, you know, of course, there will be discussion questions right through the semester that relate to real world cases and scenarios that are happening in either in Lebanon or in the region or in the world. There are, you know, the blogs, the journals, the weekly quizzes that we have, and as I said earlier, that need to be designed in a smart way so we can actually analyze those. You know, when I give the students a question that has an A, B, C, D, you know, I have 4 different colors: silver, gray, and red. Silver and gray maybe, and they may, you know, someone have read the material, they may get the answer nearby those two answers. But if someone answers it red, that means he's or she's out of completely. And so it's by designing smart formative assessments, we can actually follow up closely on those students and realize their weaknesses and their strengths and potential as well. I hope that answered your question, Samar.
Yeah, and how about the graduate attributes? Do you have that curriculum design where you got graduate attributes and then
yes, and that's as I said earlier, we had it at times of traditional learning. We have it now. This unfortunately needs to be revised. I think across universities now with the move to e-learning, and to be more realistic and to see what the virtual world now require us to have to prepare for employability. But yes, and I think formative assessments, they do help us in working towards those those graduate attributes and competencies better than summative assessments. I do think, because they're more repetitive, they throughout the semester.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm sorry to interrupt. Actually, we need to rush. I wish we would have more time to discuss about it, because it's really, really interesting.